All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the podcast or YouTube channel, depending on where you're watching this. My name is Greg Helbeck. If you're not familiar with me, I'm a millionaire real estate investor. I've been doing this business for almost 8 years now. And the goal of this podcast is to be helpful, or the goal of this YouTube channel, depending on where you're watching this, is to be helpful and share the knowledge that I've learned throughout my experience so far with you, so you can take this and apply it in your business. So today I'm going to talk about, in the continuation of our direct mail series, the direct mail piece, like postcards versus letters, what's better, what's worse. And the first thing I'll say about that is that direct mail has been one of my best deal channels, period, to date. Like, it's been one of our staples that we've grown our business with. It's consistent, it's predictable. You can pick who you want to target, and generally speaking, the leads are much better quality because they're calling you versus you calling them. Yes, you do get a lot of people who are angry you mailed them, but when you get past those people, the people who actually want to sell are pretty good leads. So at the end of the day, the list that you mail and the consistency is a lot more important than what you send the actual seller. Like, the mail piece can have some impact, but at the end of the day, if you're using a mail house that has proven mail pieces, like open letter marketing, for example, those pieces work, right? So anything you're going to send from them is on the website for a reason, because it works. So you don't got to overthink the mail piece. I wouldn't customize it. I wouldn't try to become a creative copywriter and write some slick sales message. I would just use the templates on whatever mail house you want to use. I personally like using open letter marketing. If you wanted to try them out, use the coupon code Greg at checkout and you'll get 5% off. Shameless plug there. But at the end of the day, like, if you're doing direct mail, the list and the consistency is way more important than the actual mail piece you're sending. If you just use the templates on the mail house, they're going to work, they're going to bring calls in, and they're going to bring leads and deals. So that's the most important thing. Now let's actually get into postcards versus letters. So my advice to people is that if you have a small list, like I'm calling sub 4,000 people, try to send them letters first, because generally speaking, the letters should boost a higher response rate, which means you're going to get more calls. Because if you're sending a small list postcards, you might not get, and the key there is might, not get the type of calls you could get if you get letters, which would mean that you wouldn't get as many leads as you possibly could get, right? So if you have a list under 4,000, I would test letters first and see how many calls you get. And then if you test the letters for a while and you're sending 4,000 pieces, and you're getting a certain response rate consistently after some mailing cycles, then at that point, I would test postcards out with that same list of around 4,000 and see if there's a big drop off in response. And if there's not, I would just flip over to doing postcards at that point if the response rate's the same, because ultimately it's going to be cheaper, right? So action step number one is, if you're doing a list that's 4,000 or smaller, do it with letters first, see the calls, see the responses, and then if you're getting consistent responses, I would then test out postcards and see if it drops a lot, and if it doesn't, if it's similar, then just go with postcards, because you know at that point you're going to get the same response at a lower cost. So now when does it come to like using actual postcards? So if you're mailing people, I would say 4,000 or greater, probably realistically 5,000 to 6,000 or greater, I would actually start with postcards and see what kind of response rate you're getting and see what kind of calls you're getting. And if you're getting a decent response rate, in direct mail, like anywhere from 0.003 to 0.009 is pretty much the standard now, which is like less than 1%. That's just the reality of where direct mail is in current 2023 standards. Back when I started, it was like 1, 2, sometimes 3%, depending on what you were doing. And those days are well over. And I don't think they're coming back for a while, because direct mail is just more competitive. But if you're mailing a bigger list, I would start with postcards and just see what kind of response rate you're going to get, because that's just going to be expensive if you do letters. And if you're mailing postcards to a list that's, let's call it, bigger than 6,000, because in between 4 and 5,000, in between 4 and 6,000 is kind of like purgatory when it comes to like deciding what you want to send. At that point, if you're getting good calls from the postcards, I would continue with the postcards. And if you're really not getting the calls that you're expecting, it might be a list issue. But in order to troubleshoot that, you'd want to then send a letter. And if you get way more calls with a letter, then there you go. But my general advice is, if it's a smaller list, sub 4,000, start with letters, use letters, see the calls, and then throw postcards in the mix and see if there's a big difference. But if you're going off with a list over 6,000 to begin with, I would just start with postcards. And the only way I would switch over to letters if you're not getting the calls you want to get from the postcards. So generally speaking, to wrap it all together here, the list that you mail and the consistency that you mail at is way more important than the mail pieces. I would recommend you use the mail pieces on the mail houses that are out there. I like to use open letter marketing. Once again, use the coupon code Greg, G-R-E-G, at checkout. You'll save 5% on your order. And that's really direct mail. It's a matter of consistency, a great list, good strategy, and then the mail piece is probably the last thing you'd want to consider working on. But just get something out the door. And the key here with direct mail, I'll end on this note, is it's all about trying off the bat and getting data in. You got to spend the money and send the mail to get the data back, like the calls, to determine what changes you need to have. But don't let I don't know what postcard to use or whatever to be the reason why you're not doing direct mail. So hopefully this was helpful. If it was helpful, review the show, subscribe on YouTube, like the video. If you want a JV, a wholesale deal, happy to do that. Or if you're a wholesaler and you want to just wholesale me a property, if the numbers make sense, I'll buy it. So send me an email, greg@velocityhousebuyers.com, or send me a message on Instagram @grego_37. I hope you got value from this podcast, and I'll see you on the next one.